Well, my first impressions of P&O, it has a fantastic reputation. It did have and it still has. And you would see the house flag and the ships and everything. And it really, for me, epitomised sailing and transporting passengers, that sort of thing. I just thought it was a wonderful company, and I was very proud to join it, of course. When I started my training, I had to go down to London, and I went to work for the Marine Superintendent, Captain Sergeant. At that time, there wasn't any formal training as such, but people who were accepted as women assistant pursers just worked in the office, and from then on, the powers that be got an idea as to how you would work, and so that was it. We had to have good shorthand and typing, and at that time I'd got 120 words per minute shorthand and 70 words per minute typing. And also we had to have languages. Well, I'd got Spanish and French A-level, so that was handy as well. After that, I then, after just over a year, became an woman assistant purser. So then I went from one thin white gold stripe to a thicker stripe, which was nice. And from then on, I started to work my way through the jobs that were available for the more senior women assistant pursers. So the first job that I did was something called Berthing Queen, which is a terribly un-PC title these days, and that's berthing with an E. But we were in charge of accommodation, and it was very difficult really in those days. My job was to sort out passengers, 4 in a cabin and they didn't get on, and one snored and one smoked and they wanted to change. So I had to try and find extra accommodation for them, which was really not very easy if the ship was full. And also in first class we occasionally got sent passengers who were really rather dissatisfied with their beautiful suites that they got and wanted to move to another beautiful suite. So it was for us to actually smooth the waters in that respect and sort out the allocation of cabins. I had a really rather hair-raising introduction to my time at sea. During my training, I'd been allocated the Himalaya, sailing in February 1968. But before that, I had to do a standby on board or on say, and this is when the ships are in dock or dry dock, and they just need a woman assistant purser to act as secretary to whoever's on board while the rest of the crew and officers have their leave. It was my turn to be on standby over Christmas, which was not the best time of the year, but never mind. And so I got through Christmas and was very much looking forward to going home, having a few days at home, and then just doing a bit more in the office before I went to Himalaya. I was happily typing away when our superintendent purser, Roger Porter, came dashing into the office, and he said, "Gillian," he said, "pack your cases, you're sailing in Canberra, and she leaves in 3 hours' time." So I just looked at him and I thought, oh dear me, he's got a touch of the sun or something. But he said, no, he said, the senior woman assistant purser there has got appendicitis. They can't sail with one woman short, so you're it, you have to go. So I just got my little case. All I got was my blues and a woolly suit and a pair of boots and a change of underwear, and that was it. And so I carried my little case over to Canberra and was set for 5 months with that. When I went on board, I didn't know one end of the ship from the other. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where I was going. I quickly rang Mum and Dad to say goodbye because I'd never been away from home before properly, and it was their silver wedding in a fortnight, and I missed that. So it was really rather traumatic, and I was in such a state that they had to put me in the stadium doing flowers because I just didn't know what I was doing, and I was sort of in tears part of the time. It was a very fast learning curve. You had to learn it. And as I said, when I went on board Canberra for the first time, I hadn't a clue where I was, you know, which was the front, which was the back. But I soon got to learn which was fore and which was aft. You just did, and you just lapsed into it in a way. It just seemed natural. because it sounded so odd if you didn't say that in any way. All the others looked at you and frowned, and certainly the deck officers and the captain would be absolutely horrified if they heard you call the ship the front and the back. During my time at sea, there were very few professional entertainers, and so we, the crew and the officers, were it. We were the entertainment. And in fact, I have to say, we did put on some very good shows, although none of us were professional at all. We used to rehearse for various things. We would put on an old-time music hall, and in our off-duty hours, then we'd get together and rehearse. We had various theme nights, like Roman night, when we'd dress up in togas, and the men would have helmets made out of papier-mâché basins. And the togas came from the linen locker, all the old sheets that the linen keeper didn't want. We had bistro night when we girls did the can-can, and I must admit that went down very well normally. It's amazing what you can do when you have to. I had always enjoyed dancing, but some of the others had never danced at all. But we did all right, and we managed to make our own costumes with whatever bits of material were around. It was good fun, it really was, and I think the passengers appreciated it more because they could see that we were doing a job in the daytime, and they could come up to the bureau and see that you were a receptionist or you had dealings in immigration, whatever, and they'd come up the next day and say, "Oh, I saw you last night, very nice." And it was so gratifying, really, and I think they appreciated the effort that we made, although, as I said, we weren't professional, but it was good. Pay on board for a woman assistant purser. As a junior, I received £35.15 per month, which doesn't sound a lot, and then when I rose up through the ranks as a woman assistant purser, I received £58.15, which was a bit of a jump, but I didn't receive any more when I became a senior woman assistant purser, so I just received the same amount. Bearing in mind that that was basically spending money, we didn't have any board and lodging to pay for, of course, that was all found for us living on board ship. So I think, yes, I managed fairly well on that. The company paid our money into a bank account, and then when we needed cash, officers were allowed to cash checks with us in the bureau. So if we needed any money, we would just present a check and they would give us the cash. The crew had crew payouts. They weren't allowed to present checks, and they got a certain amount of money per month they were allocated. Probably so that they didn't blow it all at the same time, really, so it was spread out a bit. That was a job that I really enjoyed, and that was one of the jobs when I became senior woman assistant purser. It involved all the paperwork and the legalities of getting passengers from A to B. And there were a lot of formalities to complete. We had to get all the passengers' personal information, their passports, age, address, etc., etc. And then we had to fill in long manifests, which we would then present to the immigration officers at the next port of call. And they would then look through them. And we would also have an immigration inspection when we arrived. So normally, the immigration officers would come on board and they would inspect everybody's passports just to check that they were legal, and also if they needed visas, that they got visas. So it was up to us to make certain that they did have visas. And if they didn't, in one particular case, a couple came on board in Honolulu going to Australia, and they didn't have a visa, and so I took it on myself to take them to the Australian consulate in Suva to make certain that they got a visa. Otherwise they wouldn't have been able to go ashore. So I was in overall charge of the girls, really. The jobs were slightly more, well, I wouldn't say important. Receptionist was important, but they were more detailed. And as you rose up, then of course more responsibility as well. So yes, I think so. I was always subordinate to the senior male assistant purser. He was the one who ran the bureau. I was more or less in charge of the females, but I had to defer to him. It was very much a man's world at sea in those days. I was one of the few who stayed for almost 7 years. A lot of them only stayed for one voyage, and then it either didn't meet their expectations or something else occurred. So there were very few women assistant pursers who actually stayed for more than probably 2 years, really, which is how I came to be senior woman assistant purser, for whatever reason. There was one senior woman assistant purser called Judy Smythe, and she did then take the job of assistant purser, woman assistant purser, further. She really felt that she needed to progress and become a deputy assistant purser, etc. And so she worked hard at trying to get the company to change their attitude towards women, and she succeeded. It was not easy, I'm sure, for her, because they were very much entrenched in the past, and what they'd always done, that was what they were always going to do, and they saw no reason to change. But of course attitudes to women were changing so much in those days, and you couldn't hold us back any longer. It wasn't fair, and it certainly wasn't fair to have us working and not receive a pension. You know, why should the men get a pension and not us? It just was very unequal. I absolutely loved my time at sea, but I was conscious, even when I joined, that there would be a limit. In those days, women officers had to retire when they got to 40. Just then, for whatever reason, the company felt that you were, I don't know, no longer useful, I suppose, or perhaps you didn't look as glamorous you maybe did in early days. So there was that, and also when you did retire or when you had to leave, then there weren't any pension arrangements either. So you just left. And I thought, when I was, after 7 years, nearly 7 years with P&O, that I really ought to be thinking of something else to do. I didn't want to leave, but I felt that this was not a long-term career. And so what was I going to do once I got to 40? It was very difficult, really, for people to start another career when they got to 40. So very sadly, I left when I was 31, but I really didn't want to at all. I mean, they had to drag me almost from the ship.